what you have online too, and I like that. So I don't know.
Did you develop your list independently?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty neat. So
Yeah,
we
so
can
mine doesn't necessarily match with yours, but I don't know, it was like here's the mind map and here's links, but then I don't know, maybe it'll be the kind of thing that we take what you created, which I think is great, and just say at the top, here's the link for the mind map, and then here's the hyperlinks or something. I've done work in the past where you add hyperlinks inside of a Word document, and there's the whole insert for that, and I couldn't get the smart art that the mind map is part of um, to allow the hyperlinks in that text. And maybe somebody will have more knowledge than me, but I couldn't get it to do it, so I just had to do it on a second page. So who knows?
Well, I wouldn't worry too much about getting it totally correct. I mean, this
Yeah.
is all a work in progress. And I like the fact that you have been working on it. My attempt was just a cursory attempt, sort of to follow up on the idea before I lost the imagination of the group effort.
I didn't know how when I saw that, I didn't know how to go and add to it with it
Well,
being the website.
well, again, this is a learning moment. I wanted to see if you could. First of all, I might have to enable some settings so that you can.
Oh, okay.
So let me, while we're waiting, oh, hey, here comes Ned. I think I just need to enable some of that editing ability. Good morning, Ned.
Hi there.
Hey,
Hi.
nice of you to join us.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't make it last week, but yeah.
Oh, that's okay.
Conversation.
7.3 billion other people didn't make it either.
Right.
But it's been good conversations. I will probably have a couple other people joining, hopefully, or not. I mean, we have a critical mass right now. Do you two know each other?
No.
Not really. Yeah.
I'm Sarah.
I'm Ned.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, here's Elaine. Yeah.
Hi there, Elaine.
Good morning. Hi.
Do you why don't we wait one more minute and then we can just start introductions? And I really liked your letter, Ned.
Yeah, it turned out, of course, I was only 10 minutes behind Frank, but whatever. I mean, if I hadn't been, I would have been glad that I'd written.
Timing was great. For those of you who might not have seen Ned's letter to the township, he was encouraging us to make a statement about the kind of the current issue that we're facing as a nation, and come out with or encourage our police department to also get involved and state their position on this. But you can describe it better than I can, Ned.
Yeah, I just asked them to reaffirm their commitment to, to peace as opposed to somehow controlling rioters and things like that. And they made a very appropriate statement, saying that they repudiate the behaviors of the Minneapolis police who murdered this guy and so forth. So George Floyd. Yeah. I just think it's really important for people to, well, especially for police departments, to look at themselves and confront the issue ahead of time, rather than saying, well, here we are in a situation where people are angry and yelling and confronting and acting reactively. If they think about it ahead of time, I think, even though there was some actual rioting in Lansing and so forth, I think the Lansing Police Department did a pretty good job of staying restrained enough to not actually hurt people. They did use tear gas, but they didn't. You didn't get bullets flying. at least not a whole lot anyway. I don't know. I haven't read every single account, but so I just, Meridian's a pretty quiet place anyway, but I wanted our police department to say something. And sort of more broadly, I wanted the community, everybody who provides facilities and services from the community to sort of contemplate the question ahead of time. I was very impressed with the people in Flint, the police department and the police chief and the mayor, who basically just put down their helmets and their batons and stuff like that and marched with the marchers. I mean, the marchers have reasons to be legitimately mad.
Yeah.
No question about it.
Well, why don't we get started with some quick intros? I think we all know each other, except some of you may have just met Ned. Ned has been on our environmental commission for a couple of decades, I believe.
Not quite, but almost. Sometimes it seems that way.
And is a chemist. So I don't want to necessarily introduce you, but if you guys could do brief introductions, that'd be great. Go ahead and Ned, and finish up on that. Anything else you want to say briefly?
Yeah, I teach chemistry over at Michigan State, and in terms of sort of my research interests, I'm looking at ways to convert, to take bio-based materials and make them into fuels and chemicals that we normally today make from fossil sources. The idea is, eventually we've got to get off fossil carbon, or we're on a very, very bad path. And so we need the chemistry to be able to do those, to make those conversions, switch those tools. So scientifically, that's my effort. Personally, I care a lot about that.
Cool.
You could join us. Sarah, do you want to go next?
Sarah Allen, been in Meridian for 13 years. Got 2 kids, 13 and 10. And so I've been spending years trying to figure out how to get the schools more environmentally sound and getting more environmental efforts in that way. And last fall, I asked the superintendent to have a meeting with me, and we met. He wanted to meet in December, so we met in December and then again in January. And I just said, I think we need to have some systems in place of figuring out how to do environmental things, so it's not based on individual volunteers, but based on having actual systems that can continue even if a person leaves. We were starting towards that, and we were going to have a larger committee start in May, and unfortunately that is delayed indefinitely because they're in such survival mode trying to get the school, in whatever way. So that's on hold, but have been doing a lot of behind the scenes work that I will be able to help when we actually get that committee going. So that I'm really excited about that, because I think being able to have the superintendent on board will be able to get us in a direction I think that will actually make some difference. One of our main goals is getting rid of the styrofoam trays at lunch, which is just a nightmare. And so that is fortunately his main goal, along with a bunch of other things that will be on there, but that one was we were going to try to have that done by the fall, which it may not matter anymore because they may not be going back in the fall, but just in the idea of figuring out how to not have that be the staple at lunchtime. So that's where we're headed. A second piece to that was we started that, and in the midst, we had a parent group that was starting to form, and we've called that Meridian Green Team, which with all of these morning coffee discussions, we're trying to figure out how to name that or whatever. That parent group will be still part of the school district. Many of those people will be on the school district meeting, but this is a parent-led to then do other things as well. So there's an aspect of that too.
It's a great idea to get rid of all that styrofoam. When I was a kid, the schools I went to, we had, part of a student's experience was working in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And we would we had, I don't know, China plates or whatever they were made of. I mean, they were things, maybe they were plastic, but they were things that were reused, and there was
Yeah.
a big old dishwasher, and part of your functions was, you know, scraping the food off and loading up the dishwasher and so forth.
Yeah.
And I don't really see why that isn't a perfectly, first of all, I think it's a good experience for kids to actually be part of the infrastructure of the school, not just the, you know, being the consumers of the educational process.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever. I don't want to get pontificating about
Well,
it.
what
Eli-
happens
Eli-
with that? What happens with that is that just that all the kitchens, school kitchens, have removed the dishwasher, so they don't even have that as a possibility.
Right, I
But
know.
also just the whole fact that the schools require this. I mean, they barely, in all honesty, the kids barely have time to even eat.
Mhm.
That's how
Right.
little time they afford them for lunch. So
Right.
it's all about lesson time. So
Let's finish up intros real quick. Elaine, you want to
Sorry.
say a couple words about yourself?
I think I'm
We can-
also from a younger, simpler time. They let us handle the money. It's what they did when I was a kid.
so
Take
you
the
actually
lunch-
learned how to use money.
Yeah.
Instead of having to spend
We
lesson
did
time.
that in elementary school. Actually, we had a simple bookstore.
Yeah.
And they only sold milk in elementary school. But in junior high, up at the central school there, we took the 35 cents from the kids. Yeah. Anyway, I don't think they even use actual cash in the schools anymore, in the lunch program. But anyway, I'm Elaine Putvin. I grew up in the Okemos schools. I haven't lived most of my adult life in this area, though. I was in Macomb County and also in the state of Indiana for many years. And I've been back here about 10 years or so, I suppose. I've been involved in environmental projects since probably the late 80s. And I've been working with Leroy and this green team that's been put together largely to handle managing the drop-off regional recycling events we've been doing in Meridian, and we've been branching off into some other projects. And my latest one is this textile recycling to see if we can get that a little bit better managed, organized, and off the ground. Anyway, I'm excited to be part of these weekly programs when I can be here. So,
Well, thank you for being here, everybody. I think I know each of you, and I'm excited to just have an extra 45 minutes to an hour to talk with people about whatever topic emerges. And I love the way the conversation was going before I interrupted it about
Okay.
student engagement through handling cash, through doing, you know, supporting the infrastructure. Food is such a great learning tool that, you know, hits you right in the stomach. And if people can understand, as Ned knows, you can understand science through food and chemistry through food. And there's just so many real life examples. One of the things that we've been working on here as a group, just to bring Ned up to speed, is a mind map, which I'm trying to weave this thought flow together here. But just being able to see our connections as an environmental community and how we relate to it, and not just to understand it, but to sort of create new networks. And so that's really what this is, a networking, open dialogue. And so I look forward to where the conversation goes, and each week's it's a little bit different. So I'm going to mute myself for a minute and let whoever wants to speak first follow up on this conversation. Have at it. Ready, set, go.
I was just curious who made the mind map and how I should understand it, because this isn't something I do or sort of look at very often.
Yeah, so neither did I, but so we started talking about it, and there's other ways to do it online. Right now, this is, well, we always had the intention of keeping it fluid, but my opportunities to go and do it online were all paid, and so at the point, like, I had to pay for them. So at this point, I've just been doing it in Word. And so what happens is at the top you have like Tri-County Regional Planning Commission, and then you go down to each of the individual counties, and then you break down into township, higher education, and then you just keep breaking down into those sections. And a lot of them could, it like I said, being a fluid thing where you just keep adding or keep adjusting. I knew that like East Lansing, it's at the bottom. It has green initiatives and it has its own green stuff, but at this point I didn't know what they were, and so that one doesn't have a whole lot there. But just kind of building that whole idea of here is some sort of committee or the township as a whole, the government part or whatever, and here's the stuff that lives underneath those sections. So I added the, since last week I went into the website and I added Harris Nature Center, and I added the aspects of things that they do. Does that help at all?
Yeah, a little bit. I was just trying to understand that. So some of the structure is just sort of the administrative structure, like the levels of community organizations or whatever. Yeah. But then I see under Harris Nature Center the various functions that they do and so forth. Okay. Yeah. Now that I read all the entries, it makes more sense.
And then we were last week trying to add hyperlinks, and I was telling Leroy when we first got on, I've done some things in Word before where you can add hyperlinks into text, and it didn't want to let me add them into each of those individual words of the it's called Smart Art in Word. And so I did a second page if you keep going down of just all the hyperlinks, but Leroy has a really nice online area where he put hyperlinks too. So it can just be a matter of we merge them together, or who knows, whatever. So.
Right.
Good morning, Emma.
Morning, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Pretty good.
Good, I'm very good.
Can you just briefly introduce yourself, Emma, if somebody hasn't met you yet?
Yeah, I'm Emma Campbell. I don't know if you can actually see me. I'm propping my phone up here. I work at the Meridian Township Parks and Recreation Department, and I'm the land stewardship coordinator. So I'm in charge of the land management that happens between the parks and the preserves.
Great. We're just catching Ned up on the mind map, and Sarah is describing some of her work, and that's where we are.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We try and make these meetings about 45 minutes to 60 minutes. And it's pretty free-ranging conversation. But is there anything else you wanted to say or ask about the mind maps?
I just want to say one thing. In our conversations many weeks ago, with the whole part of what I think has gotten us to the mind map is the whole idea that there's Green Meridian or Green Team, and then there's a Meridian Green Team that we literally started that in January or February, and we named it Meridian Green Team, and that's the parent-led group that's part of Okemos, that will be part of Okemos schools and that kind of thing. And we were just trying to figure out, well, do we merge? How do we work? Whatever. And so it was just this bigger idea of, well, how do we all function together? And who's, Leroy said earlier, like that whole networking piece. Well, if I'm working on this project, well, who else is in this scope? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. And we were also talking this morning about sort of the school initiative that Sarah's been involved with. And we started to sort of stray into this idea that, gosh, why can't the kids just do their own dishes rather than use these lunch trays, disposable lunch trays, or why can't they manage the money and get some real life experience? In your conservation corps that you are starting out, Emma, and some of the work that Harris Nature Center does is really kind of along those hands-on lines. I think it's intriguing how we use our environmental programs and resources and all the features that we have sort of on our green map as part of this educational experience for ourselves and for the community. But anyway, and the mind map is just one tool to sort of see relationships and connections in a sort of in a new light, but also to imagine new ways that we might describe ourselves. So this conversation, we've sort of come to the conclusion that this is sort of a networking opportunity. It's not necessarily our green team weekly meeting. It's anyone who wants to get involved in the conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited too because we just had a meeting with HR yesterday because we're back in the offices now, and I just got the go ahead to actually start because I've been individually meeting with some volunteers to pull invasive species, but now I can actually do trainings. I can start my workshops. I can start putting the Conservation Corps teasers on Facebook, letting them know that's going to be coming this summer. So that's exciting. That's a big step in the right direction to maybe some normalcy again.
We'll see. Yeah.
Cool.
I heard an interesting fact about a Chinese study of 7,300 people. Only one of them, they all had COVID, but only one of them got it from being outdoors. Now, this seems like more of an indoor issue. So if we get people outdoors, part of the prevention. I know everyone has different perceptions on this, but
I have a quick question for Emma, if I could. Somebody asked a question on the Nextdoor site that I noticed yesterday. They were someone brought up the importance of getting rid of the garlic mustard, and somebody was asking, well, they've noticed a lot of it, on the township lands, and who do they ask to get permission to pull? And I'm wondering, do they need permission to pull, or is there an organized effort to pull?
So there's a township ordinance that you can't take any wild, anything, plants, flowers, animals. You cannot take anything from township land.
Oh, okay.
So that is an ordinance. So that's what my job is. They have to come to me. And of course, I know there's going to be stewards out there who just do the work and they're never going to let me know. And I understand that. But anybody, you can give them my contact information. You can tell them to go to the Meridian Township website and look up the land stewardship coordinator's contact information. Really the biggest reason I want them to let me know is so they go through the proper training, because I know garlic mustard is easy to identify, but I've still seen people pulling the wrong thing, or maybe they don't realize they're in a sensitive area pulling it, and while they're pulling it they trample a very sensitive native species, or maybe they're not doing it at the right time for amphibians, so there's a lot that goes into that. So I do need to know, and I also prefer to know so I can keep records of that, because I map everything out. So I map out where the invasives are existing, and so then each year I can keep mapping that area, and we can see, where is our success actually happening. And a lot of people do want to tackle those really intense areas too, but what they don't realize is there's some areas that could use attention first that have smaller populations that we can take out, right away. So yes, they need to talk to me, and we can figure something out. So, and there is an organized effort, but it does have to go through me. So.
So
That's a
Emma,
great question.
so Emma, there's also appropriate. I mean, there are times when pulling the garlic mustard ends up stimulating it rather than getting rid of it, right? I mean, so that's the problem is that idiots like me who don't really know much about plants, you know, look at some plant that shouldn't be there and just want to say, yeah, let's yank this out of the ground. But of course, yeah, you can end up with a worse problem. And I think a lot of people don't know that or don't worry about it. I'm lucky enough to have as one of our neighbors, Laurie Kaufman, who is a very expert in plant physiology and so forth. She's actually given talks to the Environmental Commission, among other things, about invasives. And so she knows sort of when is the right time and when is the wrong time to bother these plants and to try to actually get them all the way down to the roots.
Yes, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And like with the garlic mustard and the Dame's rocket, you know, it can be mid-June to end of June because the flowers being out doesn't mean that you can't pick it. It's when the seed pods ripen and then they can, yeah. So a lot of people think, oh, maybe I shouldn't pick it because the flowers are out, but you know, you can pick it right now. It's really crazy because I've been doing a lot of invasive species posts on the Parks and Recreation Facebook, and I did one about Dame's rocket last week and it got 60 different shares.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And every share that I could go to, the conversation about it was really awesome. And a lot of people were like, oh, dang, like, I love this plant, but I'm really glad you posted this because it's in my backyard and now I can attack it. And then some people were, of course, just flat out disappointed.
Because it's so pretty, but
Yeah. Oh, God.
Right.
What's it called?
But it's also a plant that is a humongous threat to native communities. And I think it's a very interesting conversation because, you know, then there's a lot of people who say, well, it's still contributing to pollinators. There's a lot of it. It's a beautiful plant. It must have a place in the system. It does have a place in the system where it comes from. Mm-hmm. Here, it can extremely, like, it can displace native insect populations. I mean, that's why our insect populations are in such decline because they are adapted specifically to their native plants. So in another country, Japanese knotweed can support up to like 700 insects. Here in the US, Japanese knotweed can only support 1 or 2 insects. So I think it, you know, it really comes down to this very deep conversation that I can only scratch the surface of, you know, on Facebook. And so I'm going to do a post today that's honoring all native phlox and those different species and showing people how beautiful those are and where they can get them. And, you know, for me, the disappointment really comes from that people don't even know what the native phlox looks like or is. So I'm really trying to get that out. And I've been really loving the conversations around that post, and they've all been really constructive, which is amazing because it can be very controversial. So, yeah.
That goes all the way back. It goes all the way back to purple loosestrife and things like that. I mean, I don't know if you probably know this history, but one of the first biological control efforts that actually worked was on purple loosestrife and developed at MSU.
Yeah.
But that was because they identified I guess it's a beetle, right? That was super.
It's like I think it's a weevil. Or
okay.
Something, yeah.
Anyway, some arthropod that was totally specific to purple loosestrife. And purple loosestrife, when I moved here, which is 1988, was everywhere and was still expanding. And now, you know, once in a while you see one, but it's very, it's more or less totally under control.
Yeah, it's very controlled. Yeah, it's a great success story.
But there are so many.
Fortunately, yeah, they don't all go that way. But
right.
Yeah, you know, and it comes down to right now, it's mainly education because we can't. Everything is so spread out and homogenized at this point that it is going to be very hard to actually control everything. But it's mostly about education now and really preserving those areas that are still doing really well and still have a lot of native species. So it's very interesting, and I'm excited to launch our invasive species strike team and this community is incredible with how open-minded they are and how they want to progress. So I'm very excited about that.
I
With the land
reluctantly,
preservation, go ahead, Leroy.
oh, I reluctantly pulled all the Dames rocket out of my yard last week, and
Good job.
but I did it to. I'm choosing my battles in my neighborhood, and that was a tough one for me. But
It's very hard. It's very hard. I mean, when I replaced grasses in my garden, I replaced everything with native plants, and I cried a little because I don't like killing anything. You know, that's kind of my dilemma as an invasive species manager. But I think seeing those different native plants come up and the diversity that can come up in its place is really, you know, but I appreciate you doing that. Good job. I know it's hard.
it's a little.
Mm.
I appreciate the education because I've never heard of those two. So that's cool.
That's what I'm here for.
Mm.
So I can put my email in the chat too, if you have.
Leroy put it in there.
Leroy did that for you.
Oh, thank you. Perfect.
Well, you might check just to make sure I got it right.
Yeah, I will check. Yep,
Um,
that looks great.
You know, as we were talking about, we started this conversation around Earth Week, and I think we all agree that we wanted to keep doing it every week, at least for the time being, for whoever can tune in and whoever's inspired to do so. But one of the things that I thought was missing from our conversation about environmental education was this idea that was brought up early in the meeting before we even got started about sort of the hands-on real life experience, and how important that is to kids, children, and adults. And, you know, I'm not sure, I mean, Emma, you obviously connect your education and your outreach and your activities with hands-on. You've been done that for years. I think it's one of the intriguing opportunities that we have in this whole environmental discussion is thinking about how we can provide those opportunities for people and how meaningful they are to children who are often divorced from their educational or learning experience, trapped indoors in a classroom for an ungodly periods of time. And I think it's a related issue that we often separate. We don't see that connection, but I think it's an important one.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think like outdoor schools are becoming a bigger thing now too, which is kind of neat.
But also just connecting, going back to what Leroy had said about food, connecting to the things you actually do in your daily life. One of the things that, so I teach a freshman class that I call green chemistry at MSU. And one of the best sessions we ever had was when I usually take the students to on campus, there's an anaerobic digester where they take the waste food from dorms and they ferment it, and basically they make what's called biogas, which they then run through a generator, and at least it generates electric power. But the best session that we had along those lines was when we started at the Brody dorm, and we had dinner there, and then we actually went through the kitchen and saw where they scraped the food and sent it to the collection bins, and then the transportation down to the anaerobic digester, just sort of recognizing that there are these systems that are in the background, and we take for granted things like sewer and water and stuff like that. We don't even know how they work, most of us, but that one is an especially sort of green one, as opposed to just throwing the food away and letting it rot. And so just giving students, first of all, that's an outdoor activity, but giving students the awareness of these systems that run in the background all the time, and kind of the people who make them run, I think is really important. So I would love to see that stuff happening even at the grade school and high school level, much more than, frankly, at the college level. By the time they get to college, a lot of their opinions are already kind of set. And so, yeah, younger is better.
I know that in the elementary schools, I don't remember what grade level, but they have had a time where they go and tour Granger and tour the recycling. So it would be it'd be an interesting thing to try to encourage them to go do a field trip to go and see how that process works. I know as part of this committee that I'm trying to get started, one of the things that we talked about was creating more of a green curriculum within the schools. And so that will be part of that aspect. And so I'm hoping that part of that could be this conversation could lead into that of, as they create what the curriculum will look like. Maybe here's field trips, here's different aspects that we can include. And maybe part of that conversation too can be this whole idea of, it's not going to be an immediate thing, but moving back to that whole concept of not using the trays, but actually using the dishwasher. And, so I don't know where that will lead, but maybe that could move back into that somehow over the years.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, that would be a really cool field trip for the elementary school kids to go see that.
Does anybody?
Yeah, I think,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry. I
No,
just
go
think
ahead.
coupled with that, doing composting would be so, and I've done composting with kids and it can be very difficult. You have to have a lot of patience, but I think if it was something started so early, it's such a cool cycle for them to see. And I think that would be, I mean, I know that's a big thing to take on, but if we could get bigger partners like MSU or local farms to help do pickup and use that compost, because that's what we used to do with MSU at the organic farm, is we would go to Yakeley House where we first started selling them greens, and we would take their compost and we would take loads back to the farm and use it. And so I know it's a huge thing, but that would be really cool to see.
Well, Cornell Elementary has a composter. I mean,
that's awesome.
For years that has been in there, but it's that whole idea of having a system that's not based on the one person who gets it organized. So yeah, I mean, it would be great for that to be part of the kids' just standard thing while they go and eat, instead of you putting it in the trash, but we've got to have some backbone structure for how to make that actually function and get taken care of. So that can be another piece of that committee of trying to figure that out, where then the community and you all knowing what can help, help teach us where we need to go, or just in that whole network of figuring out how to create that into being.
Well, getting kids to just learn to separate sort of trash and garbage is itself a bit of a challenge. I mean, one rubber glove in the system can mess things up.
Yeah.
But I mean, Elaine is probably old enough for, like me. I remember when we got rid of garbage, that was going to go to feed pigs. And so, garbage was a completely different stream in the household from trash. But nowadays, everything ends up in a big black plastic bag and, ends up going to a landfill. That's just the culture that we've moved to.
Interesting what we used to do in the 50s when the house I'm in was first built by my parents. They had a special area where all the metal went.
And milk bottles.
Another door. Yeah, we didn't have the milk delivery when we moved to Okemos, but we did in East Lansing.
Okay.
But we had a separate chute that went down into a can in the basement. And we had an incinerator and we burned all the paper. And then when we had enough cans full of smashed cans and other garbage, whatever it was, we took it over to Park Lake Road to the dump, where that park is by Bircham now. That was a dump for many, many years across the road from Bircham Hills until they made it into a park finally. And that's what everybody used to do.
Well, and
that was a big outing for us to load up the station wagon and go to the dump. Oh, yeah.
Well, and there's communities all over the place. I mean, I know, especially in Canada, that is just the standard thing is to have your recycling and then have your compost. That is part of the system of trash recycling. It's just one of the elements. Instead of it going into the black trash bag, it goes into the compost bin that the city or whoever goes and picks up. It's just part of the system.
Right.
There's definitely interest in improving our recycling center. This is sort of an ongoing conversation, and composting is one of those areas that we could potentially focus on in the future. I wanted to also mention one of our topics of conversation here was also about kind of practicing what we preach in our own backyard, in our own workplaces, in terms of ecological landscaping, composting. There's a lot of things that are educational opportunities and environmental action steps we can do in our own front and backyards. And I know that Elaine and Bill have been involved with their neighborhood efforts to look more about greenscaping. And I just want to mention it because it has been a kind of a
To bring that up again.
choice part of our
association.
conversation in the past. And so reducing pesticides on the landscape, but also increasing pollinators and doing things like composting in our own yards, which of course can involve children as well.
Oh, sorry, my phone's falling. Bill and Elaine, you're trying to organize some of that greenscaping in your neighborhoods. When we are actually able to come out with our Planting a Native Meridian program, I'm really looking to find champions in different neighborhoods to, because I'm just one person across the township. So just keep me in mind. I'll keep you in mind. If that is something that you kind of want to take into your community, I'm just trying to identify some of those key people who are going to be great leaders to set an example for that program when it launches.
Oh.
Fantastic. We could put some of that on the green map.
When do you think what's the time frame you have for that?
I wish I could get a solid answer on that. So I myself am shooting for end of June. And now that I have the okay to do volunteer, work days and stuff and actually do trainings, the issue I'm having is that the communications department is making a website for this and all the resources. So I've been trying to be in contact with them to know, but I know they're very busy right now. They're pretty small staff. So I will keep in touch with you on that. It might even be July. It's just the way things have been going. It's been kind of hard to tell. And I honestly haven't gotten to work on it as much as I'd like to, being at home and all that. So, so I'm creating a lot of the resources as we speak. So I will keep you in the loop, and definitely if you don't follow the Parks and Rec page, you can follow that I'm going to be sending out teasers.
Like I should.
Yeah. Well, there's like quite a few pages within Meridian, so it can be hard to know that they're all there. But
yeah, we've got 3 areas that are commons in Tacoma Hills where we live.
Oh yeah, Tacoma. Okay.
One of them is I forgot how many acres. Very, very large. And largely we mow grass there. We pay between the 3 areas, probably about $8,000 a season just to mow and, keep up the area. And
that could buy a lot of native plants.
Yeah. Yeah. But, the boards in the past have looked at these different options and they haven't acted on it because they found it was a large initial investment, I guess, to make a change.
Yeah. And so that program is really, I want to try to address some of those issues and, just some people just feel overwhelmed thinking about it because they don't know where to look for resources. They don't even know where to start. So I'm really going to try to make that more accessible for people, and have pricing and have nurseries available. And I'd even really in the future like to start, once we get our feet on the ground with this, start a scholarship program for the native plant program, so that even if you can't afford to go get native plants, we could cover 50% of it, because we want to make it accessible to everyone in the community too. So, because they can be pricier. They take more time to grow. The nurseries, sometimes they hike out onto private property where they have permission just to get one little native plant. And then from there, they have to propagate it and really care for it. So they can be a little pricier than normal plants. But I think I spent $95 on 29 plants that I put in my garden. So, it can be, but they're all perennials. They're super hardy. I haven't watered them once since I put them in April. And they're all doing great. So yeah, so these are all things for future.
How does that work if you go to the local nurseries? Is that easily accessible? Here's the native plants. So like if you want to go and you say, I want native plants, is that something that they have that it's easily found of like, here's native as opposed to everything else?
So I personally don't think it's accessible as it should be or could be. I mean, you can go to Horrocks and you can pick out any plant you want. You can buy one of that plant, or you can buy a whole flat. A lot of the local nurseries right now, they do just like wholesale, or like you can buy things flat by flat. And not everybody needs that many plants. And sometimes when you go to, I mean, there is information there, and the people who work there are just like, they have so much knowledge.
Yeah.
But can you just walk in and instantly know this is shade, this is sun? They'll tell you that, and they do have signs, but to me, it just doesn't feel as accessible as traditional gardening and landscaping. So I'm working to try to identify some of those nurseries. I've even looked, there's one that comes to our farmers market called Better Finds, and you can buy one pot of a plant or one single plant. And so I'm trying to kind of get them all together. So if you do want to buy a lot of them, you can go to this nursery. If you just want to be able to go and pick, you can go here. And then we want to provide that resource to say, this is what it's going to look like. This is when it will bloom. This is where you should have it. So I want to compact all that information so somebody can just look at the list and be like, okay, cool. And even come up with a pollinator garden. Like, do you want a monarch garden? So this is what you would plant. So it's kind of why it's taken me so long, because it's a lot of information to gather in one place. But
well, I'm the association president for Cornell Woods, and so I would be the person to contact for that.
That's awesome. And I have, is it the email that we use in the green coffee chain? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it possible to identify, I mean, I'm so ignorant about plants, it's a stupid question, but is it possible to just gather seeds at an appropriate time of year if you know where there's a suitably sort of concentrated growth of a specific native plant, and actually have, I mean, and I'm asking basically whether Meridian itself could be the marketplace, so to speak, or whatever, the exchange location for at least some of these things, or is that too dangerous? Is it just so easy to end up with a knotweed seed in there or whatever it is?
No, I'm actually, and there's no stupid questions first. So I always, like, some of the people I work with, and I went to school for this, I have no idea what they're talking about, because there's just so much you can know in each area of this. And I have the same exact thought. So the reason too, I want Meridian Township to be a platform for these gardens. So it's not just gardens people can do in their backyards. I have some volunteers who are interested in starting them at a park down the street from them. Like, there's Marshall Park by Lake Lansing, which is tiny. And so I have a couple of volunteers in that neighborhood who have they said that they would like to plant a native garden and take care of it. And the great thing about that is if we set those up in parks and preserves, we don't have to spend future money on plants. We can use those gardens as seed banks.
Right.
One of the coolest things when I taught Annie's Big Nature lesson at Waldemar is the kids would gather all the seeds in the fall, and then the wintertime classes would process all the seeds and get them ready for spring, and then the springtime classes would go out and spread all the seed in the prairie. So there's ways we can involve schools in this. We can get adults doing this. I would like to eventually start a seed bank library, which DeWitt has done and Mason is trying to do, where you actually have a seed exchange and you have the seeds in a packet and they can flip through, and it's just like a library, but they're seeds. Because the biggest thing too about this is a lot of plants we buy are not local genotypes. So they may not be that useful to animals and insects. So if we start planting all these local genotypes and then we take seeds from them and we start spreading them across the township, it could just be really cool. So definitely those are all great ideas and possibilities that I think we need to chase.
So if people, in terms of what you're wanting to create and spread, like say you contact so-and-so from some association field, I mean, is there going to be some sort of protocol or some sort of whatever for saying, okay, you have this big field, this is what you can do instead of having it be mowed constantly? I mean, is that what it would look like?
Yeah, so that is definitely like this is one thing I'm trying to work on, is looking at local ordinances and everything with how long grass can be, that sort of thing. Because the thing is with these open patches of grass, we could put a garden in there and then it would be a garden. And you don't have to worry about a garden the same way as you do just grass growing. If somebody actually wanted to do like a native prairie instead, we could try to go through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They have different programs where you can actually certify it as a habitat, and then you're like exempt from those local ordinances. So, and you kind of cut out, so I'm hoping I'm answering your question. But yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of who do we talk to about this area, which is kind of where my job is going to get really busy, because I'm going to have to be more of a consultant and going out to these places and saying, yeah, you can put a native garden here for sure. Or this is actually county property, because some of the property that the guys are in charge of, it's township property, but some of it's also county property. So like some of these cul-de-sacs in the middle of neighborhoods, those sorts of things. So it's definitely things that we're going to have to check in first before we plant there. But I also work in the same building with all the people who know that information. So I'm hoping to streamline it. It's definitely going to be, we're definitely going to need to come up with some protocol for it though. Okay. If that makes sense. I don't know.
We just want to give you a time here that we've got about 5 more minutes. Obviously we have eternity to talk about these issues, but it's been a great conversation. Are there some parting, how about if we each have a chance for a parting comment or two, and as we try and wrap this great conversation up. Sarah, is there anything lingering on your mind, or do you want to come back around to you?
Go ahead. Elaine, were you trying to say something?
I was just wondering if, Emma, we're doing our board meetings via Zoom right now, of course. Would you be willing to attend our meeting this month or make a site visit to the area that we're talking about? Perhaps?
Absolutely. I would love to do that. Yes. And I can finally go out and do that and not get in trouble.
Right.
I can send you some information then.
Yes, absolutely. That's exciting.
And also I was last on this call, not last week, but the week before, and I had agreed to check into something that I cannot find my notes, and I have no idea what I said I would do. Leroy, if you recall.
Okay, I'll message you privately. We can
Okay.
talk about it. I had some things on that list too,
Uh,
yeah, maybe the clothing guy. I'm gonna talk to the
Oh, yeah.
simple
I
recycling
put
guy.
that one, yeah. That one's
Um,
on your plate now.
Okay. Emma or Jim, I mean Ned,
Oh, sorry. I should have changed my name to, yeah, right.
that's okay.
My middle name is Edward, so everybody knows me as Ned. Even though, when I publish papers and things like that, that's changed. But no, I'm just happy to meet everybody here, and this is very exciting in its own right. And to be honest, I mean, Emma, even though I've been part of the Environmental Commission forever, I didn't even know about you. I'm very
Yeah,
excited.
I just started in January, so I'm still extremely new to this whole area.
Okay, and both Elaine and Sarah, it's exciting just to. One of the frustrations of being part of the Environmental Commission, in some sense, is sometimes it feels like we're just sitting there and sort of talking to ourselves with good intentions and ideals, but not necessarily. Even though we formally have one of our mandates is sort of.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. So then they have the south part closer to.
It's sometimes
Can't hear you.
hard to
There you go.
North part,
um,
far north
to
part
reach people.
was going to be very, was going to be.
So, hearing that you're involved with your neighborhood organizations and so
Yeah, I
forth.
just remember them changing
That's
the
excellent.
layout so many times.
Yeah.
Well, Roy,
Pulling
would
the
you
different
go?
areas,
Go
different
ahead.
things.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
just mute yourself because your people around you were loud.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're okay.
I got one side
Um,
worked on, I'm working on the other.
With that in mind, we're just following up on that, if it's okay. We intended to have Emma at our green themed conversation
Right.
in May, I think, pre-COVID.
Right.
So we certainly hope you'll join us at one of the first or second Wednesdays of our Environmental Commission and kind of give us
So
an
we're actually
update.
meeting tonight, right?
We have a green themed conversation scheduled on sorry about my background noise. I'm a little distracted here. Anywho, I did want to say that the latest zoning practice has, well, actually the April one has one on practicing native landscapes.
Oh,
And
Nice.
I'll share a draft of that with you all.
Yeah.
I also am overloading the communications department with coming up with a new brochure for this green finding tour. And this is a work in progress, but it'd be nice to have some of your initiatives listed in here, Emma. And
Yes.
maybe
Yeah.
this complements your, I can see us putting some of those champions you mentioned for green landscapes, as well as, a reference to the Conservation Corps and maybe the Harris Nature Center's native plant sale and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm working on for the green team, I'm working on the green map contest, how to make that function. So.
Yay.
Yeah, that's great.
And we'll continue to work on the green map and sort of the list of local resources. I'll give you permission to anyone who wants to help edit that on Google Drive. Thank you for your progress on that, Sarah. Any other
Yeah,
parting
thank you.
comments?
I was gonna say, yeah, just reach out to me if you want me present at any of those meetings. If there's one tonight, I won't be able to do that tonight because it's my grandma's birthday. But yeah, definitely the next one, if that's something, and I will also come up with like a little mini presentation too, if that would be helpful for people to see things and kind of have a picture in their mind. Yeah.
Cool.
great.
Any other parting comments before we pause, leave?
Is there anything else that I guess I would just say be ready next week or whatever if there's anything you want to add to the green to the mind map. I've said before, we've talked in discussion, it's a very fluid thing, so it's always available to be adjusted or whatever. So
Yeah, thank you for working on that, and thank you all for your hard work.
Well,
Yeah.
likewise. Yeah.
Oh, I do have a question. For the Friends of the Parks, should that be under land preservation?
So I don't know, as far as when I've talked to Jane and Luann, I think they're kind of nixing the name Friends of the Parks.
Okay.
I think they're going to try to bring it in under the Conservation Corps. Yeah, so I would maybe just say the Meridian Conservation Corps, because it does kind of go through even people who are just like picking up trash and beautifying. So
So land preservation, Meridian Conservation Corps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't there a Facebook group that's Friends of Meridian Parks or something like that? I thought there was. There's definitely a Friends of Meridian Pathways.
Well, definitely keep it too if you think, because like I said, I'm so new, but they've kind of said like it's something that's kind of fallen to the wayside and they haven't really worked with people on it. I don't know. So yeah, maybe just keep it for now, but I think we're going to try to kind of rebrand it, I guess. I don't know.
Cool.
I
Thank
thought
you.
a cool mind map to make might be kind of based on what we talked about today in terms of food and money and yards, in terms of home-based, community-based education, and sort of those environmental themes that might, not just environmental, but social themes that might be ways that we can engage each other. So I'll work on that, and I think a visual might be more helpful. But thanks everybody for being here. Anything else?
Thank you for organizing.
Well, see you next week.
All right.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Thanks.
Easy.
Bye-bye.